I've been kind of working with a couple of themes, and I realized that there are three things I kind of want to bring together. First of all, we had the suggestion to talk about intoxicants, and not the normal ones, not just the fifth precept of avoiding intoxicating drink and drugs, which lead to carelessness, but to also think about other kinds of intoxicants, the things that draw us in and bring about some carelessness or negligence and craving and maybe addiction. So I wanted to share that, but I also, there's been a lot of coming up for people around oppression and violence, and I thought I'd kind of pull that in, and also issues of privilege and the blind spots that it can cause. So I thought, I think these three things could be brought together a little bit like braiding. When I was a girl, I had long hair and I learned how to braid. Of course, I haven't used that skill in a while, but I thought I'd just take these three strands and share some thoughts. I'm actually going to share my screen with you, and it's going to have my notes. I think it's going to be easier to follow that way. Just see if I can make that happen. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so you can see the basic three ideas there. And I'm going to start with, talking a little bit about intoxication and negligence. The Buddha talked about intoxication with food, and I think that is one of the things that we can get drawn to and get kind of hooked on. And of course, we also have a lot of things in our life, that some of which may have been in different forms in the Buddha's time, but we can really kind of distract ourselves. Why do we gravitate towards these things like social media, maybe to distract ourselves? I mean, there can be a lot of good uses for these things too. Sometimes we want to get away from what our suffering, and we want to turn away, which I've often said, when people take the 8 precepts, those that turning the sexual misconduct precept into celibacy and taking on avoiding entertainment, beautification, and adornment, and avoiding eating later in the day, and avoiding sleeping on a high and luxurious bed or indulging in sleep. Those really are training precepts to help us with the things that we crave and the things that we use to block out the world or block out our feelings, not deal with them. And so that's kind of all on the same theme of how we become intoxicated or negligent. We can also get intoxicated with power or authority, and I'm sure we can think of a lot of other possibilities. And I wanted to just share a few of the suttas where the Buddha addresses this, and you might want to read them. One in the Majjhima Nikaya. These are 3 here in the Majjhima Nikaya. The number 2 is called All the Taints, or All the Defilements, and it talks about different ways that we address them. And in there, he talks about abandoning some of the defilements by using things, and in particular, the requisites, the things we have to use. We have to use food, but he talks about how we can, get caught up in food, and the reflection on how to avoid that. We'll talk more about that later. And he has a similar kind of idea in the Sutta number 25. It's called the bait. He talks about how the deer trapper puts out the bait, and the herd of deer becomes intoxicated with the bait, and then they lose their mindfulness. They're not aware, and the trapper gets them, and they come to ruin as a result. And so, of course, this is a simile for what happens to us in life sometimes, and we get caught up in those things that we find pleasurable and distracting. And then he even talks in the Sutta number 29, the Greater Discourse on the Simile of the Heartwood, about how a monk or any practitioner might, come to the practice with the right idea, like, this thing, I am a victim of birth, old age, and death, of sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. I'm a victim of suffering, prey to suffering. Surely an end of this whole massive suffering can be known. So says the Buddha would say, I don't know, I haven't always seen the translation as victim, but we are born, and we all are likely to grow old and experience old age and certainly death. And the question, here is how do I work with that? How do I overcome that? And so but then the Buddha goes on to say, well, then this mendicant, begins to gain wealth. People make offerings. They become honored and popular, and then they start to glorify themselves and put others down because of it, like saying, oh, the other ones, they're not popular, they don't get offerings like I do, and they're not honored the way I am, they're obscure and insignificant. And then becoming intoxicated with that, becoming negligent. Like this kind of grows negligent, falls into negligence, and being negligent lives in suffering. And of course, what's useful is to look at ourselves. Are there any times when we feel like that? Better than someone else? Kind of getting caught up in whatever gain we've made. And the Buddha keeps going with this, talking about developing virtue and becoming the same way, thinking we're better than the other people practicing, getting into the same kind of thing. And even with our concentration abilities, or, being immersed in samadhi. And even he goes as far as being really pleased with our own insight, knowledge, and vision. And on account of that, glorifying oneself and putting others down. Sometimes that can be quite subtle. Maybe we feel like we wouldn't want to do that, but maybe internally there's a bit of it there. It's good to try to see it when it happens. We're going to get to the solutions in a bit, but we'll think first, like another way that the Buddha talked about becoming intoxicated is with being young, healthy, alive. The Buddha talked about, see if I have it here. Oh, down below, we'll see how that intoxication with youth and with health and with life, not thinking about how we're going to die or how we're going to grow old or become ill. So when we look at what do we get intoxicated by ourselves, and how do we know when that's happening and can feel it in a way. We'll talk about more of that in a minute, and I'll be happy to hear. I'm interested in hearing examples you have in your own experience, maybe by seeing others do it, and also maybe what we experience ourselves. And this sutta I found interesting, and it starts to tie into the another theme here. This is from the Samyutta Nikaya. It's the third book, number 6, and it's called Few. This is in the Kosala Sutta, Kosala Samyutta, so it's about King Pasenadi. And King Pasenadi says to the Buddha that he had this thought, this reflection. Few are those people in the world who, when they obtain superior possessions or luxury possessions, do not become intoxicated and negligent, yield to greed for sensual pleasures, and mistreat other beings. Few are those people in the world who do not become intoxicated and negligent, yield to greed, or like indulge in greed for sensual desires and mistreat other beings, and how that all goes together. Far more numerous are the people in the world who, when they obtain superior possessions, become intoxicated and negligent, etc. And the Buddha agrees with him. And then the Buddha says, enamored with their pleasures and wealth, greedy, dazed by sensual pleasures, they do not realize they've gone too far. Like deer that enter the trap laid out, afterwards the bitter fruit is theirs, for bad indeed is the result. So reflecting on this kind of way that we can be affected by things that happen in our life that come to us, that we gain some kind of superiority. And then, where can this lead? And then this is where the reflection on violence and oppression, that King Pasenadi says that people tend to mistreat other people. And, have we seen that? What kind of intoxication is involved when what we're seeing now with the invasion of Ukraine, for example? There's definitely this power, this belief at some level that it's the right thing to take over another group of people, and all the violence that's involved in that. I mean, I was teaching a retreat for a week, and I didn't look at any kind of news or hear anything from the outside, and come back and hearing about the bombings and the killing of so many innocent civilians, and that they're being targeted. It's not a military struggle so much as just wiping people out. And to think about what the blind spots are and the intoxication. Certainly no idea about karma, no idea about how our actions come back to us, that there is a result, bitter fruit. And another issue that's been brought to us is from Anagarika Sarna, her experience in Mexico. She told us recently that there had been a march, another protest by young women, and that then there were threats of violence. I didn't check back in with her to find out what happened, but she said they were closing our university. People couldn't come in because of the danger to the young women. And, looking at femicide in Mexico and the history of it over decades, like since the 1990s, I think I read, there are a couple of, articles. There was an interview on NPR with Lydia Cacho, and looking at the violence against women. And so I picked out these couple of, references, and I thought maybe I'd put those in the chat. Let me see if it's possible, just in case you want to see them. Let's see if I can. Yeah. Yeah. There you go in the chat if you want to look these up. Just to kind of understand, what happens in a culture. Forgive me for being, I know that I'm actually very ignorant about these things, and Emma might have a lot more to tell us. And certainly Anagarka-san could, she's not with us today, but to really have a clearer idea of what this is all about and how one might help. And then a couple weeks ago on International Women's Day, I was invited to give a talk for the Ambedkarites, for the Dalit community of Indian Buddhists. And in preparation for that, I watched again the film. I'll stick that in the chat too, of Dr. Ambedkar's life. It's really moving and just really emphasizes the challenges, the horrors that can come into a society. And again, how can we help? So, these questions, are related. I feel like to understand how human beings can become so oppressive, abusive, violent, we also need to understand our own minds and how we can practice to really work through those defilements that lie at the root of these kinds of actions. And of course, with all three of these, people involved are bringing other people to ruin as well, which is another whole layer of karma that is getting created. There's a sutta that may have heard me talk about before in the Samyutta Nikaya 42, number 2, where this head of an acting troupe, he's an actor, he comes to the Buddha and he says that he's learned from the line of actors going back to ancient times that if you're on stage and you're entertaining people, it says in the sutta, with truth and lies, and then you die while you're doing it, then you'll go to the heaven of laughter. And the Buddha said, he said, is that true? And he keeps asking, and the Buddha keeps saying no. But on the third time, the Buddha says, I'm just not, no, he didn't want to tell him, I'm not getting through to you when I say, let it be, don't ask me that. And so I'll answer you. And he says that when someone's acting on stage and people are there who are still experiencing lust, and the actor entertains them with titillating things that excite them more strongly to lust or hatred, and entertaining them with infuriating things that excite them more strongly to hatred, or with delusion, increasing the delusion, then being intoxicated and negligent himself, having made others intoxicant and negligent after death. It's not the heaven of laughter, but the other way around. And, this is something that is important for us to think about. I don't know if you've had this experience. I have not, I don't think, in my life, but I know people, my daughter has mentioned it, and other people, like, they don't want to use alcohol, but they're at some gathering and people are actually pretty forceful at wanting them to drink alcohol with them. And it's like, how do we become sort of caught up ourselves in things and then try to recruit other people to be caught up in those same things that actually are not good for us. So then the third topic, I hope this isn't too complicated. See if the braid works for you, but to really look at the ways in which we ourselves are in a position of privilege and how that's also intoxicating, and how we can really, it takes some real digging to understand what is going on there, and how we're actually treating other people, or how other people are affected, even if we personally are trying to not put them in a position of less than, or having less, or having less opportunity. And of course, we can always go back to the Majjhima Nikaya 98, the Viseja Sutta, and look at that whole list of things that the Buddha says, this is not how we should judge or evaluate human beings. All these things that we, as you know, in our world, in our cultures, use to discriminate against one another, those aren't what's important. What's important is your development on the spiritual path. And as we saw before, you don't glorify yourself and put others down for that either. So it's really an important aspect for us to consider, and how it relates to these other areas. How, being privileged in some way and not seeing that and not looking after it, and then how we can become intoxicated, and how we can even get to the place of doing a lot of harm. This, I think, is important for us to reflect on and see where that comes up in our own life. Because this is really about practice, and how do we really take care of our own mind, develop the humility, the kindness, the compassion that is so integral to our awakening. So the sutta I mentioned earlier of all the taints, when we look at what did the Buddha say about how to reflect on what we eat so that we're not intoxicated. That reflection that the monastics do, we do all the time, wisely reflecting, I use this food not for fun, not for pleasure, not for fattening, not for beautification, only for the maintenance and nourishment of this body. And if we really think about that when we're eating our favorite dessert, what's the effect? Do we go after more that we don't need? It's like really bringing mindfulness and wisdom to what we're doing on such a very kind of ordinary, mundane activity as what we choose to eat, and how much, and why. And the simile of the heartwood, when he talks about how this person who's picked up the holy life, but they get caught up either in their gain and their honor and their popularity, or their meditation prowess, or their virtue, or their knowledge and vision. And instead of thinking they're better than someone else, they're not satisfied with that. They're like, I'm not enlightened yet. I have work to do. There's the humility, and they don't glorify themselves and put others down. And they don't become indulgent and fall into negligence, or they don't become intoxicated with whatever they feel they've gained. And then the Buddha gives good examples about working with this idea of old age, sickness, and death, when he himself set out on his search. And he did it because he realized that he's, and often people are repelled, horrified, and disgusted when we see someone else who's old. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience, maybe as a child, maybe even now, kind of draw back from, old age, sickness, and death. But he said when he thought about it, it's not right for me to be disgusted by this, because the same thing is most likely to happen to me. And then his intoxication with youth, and his intoxication with health, and his intoxication with life were abandoned. So what does that mean? We're really looking directly at reality, and it's freeing. It's like the intoxication with life. There's maybe a surge or a feeling of power, or a feeling of superiority, or a feeling of the ego somehow, but it's not peaceful. It's not reflective. It's not wise. It's not grounded. And so when we see that, it comes back to that. Why do we do things that kind of bring on that kind of intoxication? We don't want to really deal with our dukkha. And when we have privilege in a society, it's kind of already a built-in delusion. And it's up to us to unpack that when we are in the privileged position. And we can get help from people to help see our blind spots, but it's really our responsibility to dig into it. And the result is beautiful, because we're not puffing ourselves up, even unintentionally, maybe even unknowingly. There's still some feeling of not being completely real and grounded. And once we know that, once we see for ourselves like more of the truth of reality, we can feel more solid. And this is one of the ways that the mind becomes unshakable. We're not buying into the delusion anymore. We turn and work directly with our experience of suffering. And then this last bit here, the kindness, compassion, really deep virtue, not just our speech and actions, but also the deep virtue of purity of the mind, our equanimity around all the things that human beings do that are creating this kind of destruction and harm, to really be able to look upon it knowing, yeah, that's some samsara. There's no end to those things, but we can be free of it through our own realization of reality. And I don't mean it's not like an escape. It's a deep understanding. And a lot of humility comes with it. So that's kind of a mouthful. And I hope it's making sense. I think that it would be a good time to meditate a little bit. I will tell you that today I have to leave right at 10:30 because of a medical appointment. But I think if we meditate maybe about 20 minutes and then have some time to talk, because I'd love to hear what you think about all of that and how it relates directly to our life and our experience. So please make yourself comfortable. Give some attention to your posture. Bring your awareness to your breathing. Take a few deep breaths and Notice how your body feels right now. And I touched on quite a few maybe disturbing things. It's good to really attend to how the body takes these things in and how it feels. Our body is an incredible tool for awareness, helping us understand where we stand. And wherever there's tension or tightness, we can, with our in-breath, with our out-breath, relax that area. Just bringing some kindness to wherever that tension might be, kind intentions. Can bring up a sense of gratitude for this opportunity to be together, to explore the Dhamma. Even if we're exploring difficult things, that's really important. It's important in life that we are willing to turn towards what's scary, upsetting, difficult, with mindfulness and clear understanding. That's how we become free. Even if what we discover is striking at some very fundamental beliefs we have, or uncovering some defilements we are working with, it's always better. It can seem like there are really dark and difficult things, and as long as they're left in the shadows, they seem really large. But when we take them into the light of day and look at them, they're never as big as we expected. They shrink down. It's just this feeling of wanting to be safe but being afraid, feeling of, something that the ego has been puffing itself up over, but it's hollow. It doesn't really bring happiness. Like the Buddha said, we can think highly of ourselves for various things, but it's not really freedom. We still are immersed in suffering. But when we look, when we really observe from the stable platform of mindfulness, then we can have compassion and kindness for whatever that is that we've done in the past, or ways that we've thought, or things that have happened to us. We can forgive. And go straight upwards. So as we're breathing in and breathing out, taking care of our body and our mind, we can invite the body to become more calm. We can invite our mind to become more settled, thoughts settling down. We can observe the mind itself. And we can start to feel joy arising in the body, happiness. It's a natural outcome of good moral virtue and mindfulness. Can really appreciate the good that we do in our practice in living our life, trying to live our life in a good way. And even if we make mistakes, our intentions and our efforts are moving in the right direction. And we can be happy in that. And when we feel any indication of spiritual happiness, then we can invite that to expand until it fills our entire being. And everyone, or there are many ways at least of experiencing this. We learn for ourselves what that tuning into a spiritual dimension brings for us as individuals, what are the indications, and inviting those signs to expand. To develop. Welcome to all of you who came in either during the talk or during the meditation. And today I was drawing together topics of the way we can get intoxicated with various things that aren't actual substances that we know cause that, but ways that we indulge in our wishes to avoid what we feel or pursue our desires that can bring on intoxication and negligence and a couple of other themes, the oppression and violence that sometimes occurs in our world as a result of these fundamental defilements, and also how we might be deluded or unaware of our own actions when we're blinded by privilege. So that's the topic. And I'm interested in thoughts you have. And I should have asked earlier, can you all hear me all right? I've lost the rhythm here. Not, I didn't plug in the usual microphone, so I'm glad it's working out. Anyone want to say? Oh, Kelly.
Sure. I'll briefly just say the experience I had the opportunity to go through. I was prepared for it, and so was everyone in my home. And I didn't recognize that until now. And living simply, and really simply, like my great-grandparents just came from Ellis Island. That's how I did it. My spouse, who's just like Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, said, "What was the best day in your life?" And I knew that. It was so weird. You know, I had a moment. I've had a lot of cool moments. I've had a great life. I stand on shoulders of amazing people. So for me, I went to boot camp, I would say. I have no birth family. So I went to life boot camp. I had every privilege in the world taken away. Recipes, Christmas, a lot of money, honor, dignity. Watching my children fall apart has been horrendous. And being there to help rise them up. And watching them rise up. My daughter is now 35th in her class, learning how to find the empowerment. I was doing life wrong, all of it, every darn bit. So I believe for me, it has to do with the energies in the universe. I no longer curse as much. So I don't throw it out there. I do. I found out I'm an introvert, or I don't know if I play the piano. Beethoven's music. I believe he understood binaural beats. I have CPTSD. I don't take any serotonin uptake. I produce it. I am a survivor of 23 crazy things. So for me, I'm just excited that I got to find happy again. And I feel weird saying it because that feels like bragging. You know, I'm serious. I've been sitting quiet for so long. I found out I could draw. I found I could play the piano and dance like Shakira. I have 7 new brothers and sisters, and they're amazing. My brother is the founder of the Microsoft Disaster Recovery Team. And my sister, she called on Trump's nieces and nephews. She's a real, so am I. And I've been an advocate. And I've done big things, but I was afraid. I don't know. It's just amazing that being quiet. When Tricia said, "What was the best time in your life?" I said 1976. And I knew. So I put myself back in that role as what my grandmother did.
So Kelly.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's
okay. Thank you. Thank you
very
much.
Thank you. I get so nervous. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. You're okay. Don't worry. Thank you. Kelly Muehlman.
Yes, thank you, Ayya. It was really useful to think about these things. And I just wanted to raise something that was coming up for me when I first learned the news of what's happening in Ukraine, in that it brought a lot of confusion and tension in myself, because for a long time, or for as long as I can think, I thought of myself as a pacifist, and I would never use violence or condone it. And I feel a lot of metta and compassion for the people in Ukraine, and also for the Russian soldiers who are in a very difficult situation. But when I was watching the news at first, the thing that came up automatically in my mind is maybe military action or violence is needed to stop the killing of these innocent people. Because if not, then any aggressor kind of has the upper hand and can do whatever they want to do. But at the same time, also realizing this is samsara and this is going to happen. And I wonder to what extent linking maybe into privilege is the pacifist position a privileged one, because it's easy to be pacifist when you're not being attacked. And so I've got this real tension arise within me every time I think about it, because I think no, absolutely no violence. But then how do you stop that? So I wondered if you had some thoughts on how to deal with that.
I think really looking at the Buddha's teachings as an example will help, because the Buddha certainly had no exceptions to the use of violence. I mean, he did, I mentioned once before, he did at one point raise the question of, is it possible to lead a country without that? And he never answered that question. It's like his position is coming from the spiritual path, like this is, you try to help, you try to stop people from doing horrible things, but you also have the value of not killing. And so for us as individuals, it's like you said, right now we're not in the position, it's a privileged position in a way, but this is a kind of position anyone in the world can be in, where they're not subjected to violence and they're not in a position to stop someone who's doing that. But to really look, I think for us, to really look to the purity of the mind as the highest priority. But that doesn't mean we shut off what's going on in the world. The Buddha was very engaged. He was there. He was clear about, what the results of things are, the results of karma. And so it's really, I think really an investigation for us is in the practice to realize this isn't just about coming out with an idea of should this happen or should this be done or should that be done, but it's really like looking deeply within ourselves at our own defilements, working with them and developing the mind so that we can make good choices and support what's good. I hope that's helpful. Neil, why did you decide not to talk? I'm curious. It's okay if you don't.
I think my question is irrelevant for now.
Okay, thank you. Joyce?
I'm feeling really nervous about this, but I'm going to go ahead because I really have a lot of passion for it. And I really appreciate your introducing that whole idea of blindness of privilege, because I think that's going to really help me. I'm trying really hard to apply what I know of the Dhamma to this situation in Ukraine. And I'm actually feeling very alone in this. Just had a very difficult interaction with a friend of mine who, well, I won't go into details about that, and I just want to say, like all of us here, I feel incredible amount of compassion for what is happening to the people of Ukraine. It is absolutely heartbreaking to think that you're living your life and all of a sudden it's thrown into this absolute horror. But on the other hand, there's all these other refugees all over the country or all over the world, some of whom are refugees as a result of the US, refugees on our southern border. Look at Afghanistan. We're funding Saudi Arabia to attack Yemen, and we don't even pay any attention to any of those people. And it's heartbreaking to me to see that difference, because I see that as a blindness of privilege. The news media doesn't cover it. And then during the buildup, been reflecting a lot on how everything arises out of causes and conditions. It didn't start when Russia started to build up military forces on the border. It didn't start there. There's causes and conditions. And I was very alarmed at the belligerence of our government and of the news media. The one-track mind of demonizing. I found this problematic, but it's very difficult to voice these concerns in this particular environment. Get a lot of really angry pushback from people who are very dear to me. And I really do not go in with a lot of, the Dhamma has really, really affected me. And it's hard for me to go into even that fight back mode. I can't do it. I feel very helpless around it. And if you see anything incorrect in my thinking, I'd like you to say it. I can handle it. I really want help with this. And so I think I'll just stop there.
Yeah. Thank you, Joyce. I mean, one thing that I think is important is to always hold a bit of a question in our mind about what we hear in the media, the fact that we're not right there seeing these things for ourselves all the time. So we can always have a bit of a bit of openness to the fact that we may not be getting the full story. We're definitely not getting the full story anytime. And yet there are some facts that come through, I think, that are actually facts. And of course, what you say is true. It's not the beginning, starting at any particular chapter. And it's always been this way, and it was this way at the time of the Buddha. And I think one thing we can take from the Buddhist teachings is, like when we took some of these suttas on war, on battles in sutta study recently, and the Buddha talked about the two different rulers who were fighting and how one of them was immoral in his actions and had immoral friends, and the other one was good in his actions and had good friends. And of course, in human life, a lot of times it's not so easy to be so black and white. But, as we look at things like the bombing of, civilian buildings and where people are trying to, go for protection, intentional destruction of, the, schools and the kinds of attacks on ordinary civilians, women and children. We can look at that and recognize that there is something really deeply wrong happening. Now, like I said, we can hold our mind open. We can really understand that there is no end to this kind of activity as long as there is greed, hatred, and delusion. And it doesn't make it okay. I think the Buddha really, the way he talked about things and the way he looked at things was so even-minded, when we do this kind of action, this is the kind of result you get. When we do that kind of action, that's the kind of result we get. And to recognize that we're all subject to those same results. So these are some of the ways to look at things. And I think it's so important, like you said, a key is to look at our own blind spots. Where are we setting ourselves above others? Enjoying a privilege at the expense of others. These are some of the things.
Could I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
If we heard the news from places like Afghanistan or Yemen, if we paid attention to that, the same kinds of things are happening, bombing of schools and homes and places where innocent beings dwell. And it's as a result of our actions, our very country, our privileged country.
Yeah. And our country has done a lot of things.
No, I'm trying to keep the list to a small number here just to make a point.
Yeah.
But it's causing me a lot of pain. Not that individually I wish it was causing some pain to others as well. That these other things. But thank you for your words.
I know that it's not like you want people to have pain, but you would like us to see things more clearly, all of us.
A larger view. Yeah. More of a, I guess it would fall in the basket of right view in my mind, and maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe that's a wrong view, but
well, I think the
Dhamma.
The right view is, yes, regardless of who the violence is who is being treated in this way, regardless of who is doing it, the karmic results are the same.
I just flashed on the whole idea of non-ill will, which is very big part of right view. Non-ill.
Yeah.
A huge standard.
It's right view, and it's also right to, the Buddha said, blame what is blamable and praise what is praiseworthy. And if you blame what is praiseworthy, you're in the wrong. And if you praise what is blamable, you're in the wrong. It's like to get this straight.
Yeah, and this brings up the sanctions, which are going to be causing immeasurable harm to many innocent people. So anyway, thank you. I don't want to take all the time.
Yeah, thank you, Joyce. I know for myself, I'm really blessed to live with people who aren't white, because that's the privilege that I know has had so much impact on my life, and there's such a blindness around it. And to try to, consider it. We're working to try to see the true nature of reality. We have to be willing to look at, what are the blind spots that I've been raised with, that have been continually reinforced in my environment, and to really be willing to look at that. And if we look hard enough, I think we'll all find that there are times when we're in the privileged position, in the sort of dominant group, and sometimes when we're not, and how it feels, and try to expand that understanding so that we can see it, and see how we can be different, how we can really align with people in groups that are oppressed and support them. And we're not going to change samsara, but we can do a lot to be more kind, more understanding, more supportive, and protective. And I really appreciate everyone sharing, because, you know, to come to this from the place of what is the Dhamma, and am I really living it? And how can I be more clear, open, humble? You know, how can I be more inclusive? I think these are really important questions, since we are serious about the practice. We're serious about our development. And, you know, it would be so much easier to take an intellectual perspective on the Dhamma and just learn the suttas and learn Pali, you know, think in a nice, pristine way about it all. But that's not how life is. And we have to look at the reality of the situations in our own lives and in the world and be willing to face it. Because otherwise we can't even face how the fear and the anger and the resentment and the desires arise in our own selves and deal with it. We wind up, you know, finding a way to avoid it. Those intoxicants, shopping, watching movies, whatever it is, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. We have to know why we do what we do, how it feels inside, if there's something we're avoiding, to turn and look. That's where the freedom comes.